everyone. Welcome back. My name is April Seifert, and I'm so excited to be chatting with Dr. Molly Maloof today. She provides personalized medicine to entrepreneurs, investors, and executives. Since 2012, she's worked as an advisor or consultant to more than 50 companies in the digital health, consumer health, and biotech industries. She's an educator and has been to medical school. She's pioneered a course on health span for 3 years at Stanford University. She's the founder and CEO of Adamo Bioscience, a company that aims to reveal how the science of love can unlock the capacity for health, healing, connection, and creation with everyone. She's appeared in numerous media outlets and presents to organizations, companies, educational institutions, conferences, and summits all over the world. Dr. Molly, I'm so excited to have you with us today. I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have an incredible background, and we're going to dive into a bunch of different areas within it. And I think we'll probably meander around a little bit today because of that.
Sure.
But I want to start with the basics. So you've been considered one of the experts in biohacking. And I feel like that is a term that gets maybe some misconceptions. It gets misconstrued out there. But given what we're working on in this summit, it's an important one to understand. So can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how you got interested in it?
Well, when I first started my practice, I wanted to not just fix sickness, but I also wanted to optimize health. And health optimization was not modern medicine 10 years ago, maybe longer. So it was just not a thing in medicine. And that means that I had to go around the system in order to get my patients what they needed, which means ordering labs for people when they're not sick and measuring functional organ capacity with different, markers before somebody was ill. And that just isn't mainstream medicine today. You can't get your health, your health needs covered unless you have a disease, unless you have a suspected illness. And so biohacking is really going around a system to get what you want to optimize your health. And it's really about measuring and monitoring different facets of your health so that you can come up with hypotheses about what it is that you want to change. And then you can implement experiments to actually see if those markers are shifting. It's very data driven, but it's also the frontier now. I mean, it's becoming more and more commonplace that people are talking about going to a doctor for longevity, going to a functional medicine doctor to stay healthy. In Chinese medicine, this has been around for thousands of years, this idea of going to a doctor to stay healthy and not to see them when you're sick. So we have a really fundamentally backwards healthcare system that is frankly not doing a great job at maintaining health. It's really good at fixing sickness if you are very broken and traumatized, for example, in a car accident. But it's because it was derived from military medicine and battlefield medicine. So it's very reactive. And I was interested in proactive medicine. One of my favorite people, Leroy Hood, pioneered this concept of P4 medicine, which is personalized, predictive, preventive, and participatory. And I do see that there is a movement towards this, but I think biohacking was one of the first original places where people were like, okay, I'm not getting what I need from the system, so how do I get it? And now there's just hundreds of companies that are providing products and services that I used to offer and still offer in my practice as a very high touch, personalized, bespoke medical product. And now things are getting cheaper, more scalable, more affordable, and more widely available.
I love that. It really feels like you are taking the best of two worlds, right? Like if we can point out one thing that, the field of medicine, and I'm going to say very broadly, does, it is this idea of being very data driven, being very evidence-based and research focused. But there's that element of, you mentioned Chinese medicine, that's focusing on well-being and almost like backing up the point at which we're starting to intervene with people. And that's kind of where I want to go next. You hit it on the head. You talked about traditional medicine, particularly in the West or in the US. We focus a lot on treating symptoms. So someone gets sick, they come to us with some type of complaint or symptom, and we treat that and we treat the disease. But given your focus on treating underlying issues, being more proactive, can you talk a little more about how those approaches are different? And then even more importantly, how we as listeners and as participants in this summit might experience different outcomes if we went one of those routes versus the other.
If you want to optimize health, you need to know what health is. So there's different facets of your health. There's your mental health, there's your physical health, there's your gut health, there's your sleep health, there's your hormone health. There's a lot of different things that you can get measurements for. Your metabolic health is a big one that I focus on, because if your metabolic health isn't healthy, then you're not going to have normal mental health or physical health. I don't really see the mental and the physical as two separate things anymore. I really do see them all as one thing. So if people have problems with metabolic health, they're going to have issues with their brain functioning. And so first thing I always look at is, how is a person digesting their food? And then how are they assimilating that into their mitochondria? And how well are their mitochondria turning their substrates into fuel, into like energy, essentially. So energy is really the main focus of my work. And then, when you think about a person's energetic resources, the question is how do those get spent? Those get spent doing work, those get spent with stress, those get spent with challenges, and how well a person adapts to those challenges is a really big marker of health. So with that sort of baseline, I like to give a person a really long questionnaire. It's like a booklet that's about 60 pages, and it's just questions that I ask them about their health, and it's their medical history and it's their functional history. So it's like really looking at both sides of the coin. Like, does this person have any illness anywhere? And does this person have high level wellness? And what is their mental, physical, and emotional wellness, spiritual wellness look like? And then what is their executive functioning? How are their organs working? So I'm really looking at everything I can see from a qualitative perspective. And then from there, I've got a certain amount of labs that I order people. And then I use those to basically provide a hypothesis of what I think is going on. And then we start running experiments and interventions. And it's very bespoke, very personalized, obviously not widely available to everybody right now, but most people can start with, I have a blood sugar monitor on my arm, and blood sugar monitors in 2014 were not normal to be wearing if you weren't sick. I was using them all the way back then. And now you can get a blood sugar monitor from Levels. I've got a course that can teach you how to interpret it, called Your Health Span Journey. And I'm doing a promo with Levels right now. We're giving people 2 months on top of their subscription for free. So basically, I first and foremost want to see, is a person's metabolic health good or not? And if you have metabolic dysfunction, you're going to have other problems downstream. And then with gut health, if you have constipation, diarrhea, if you have GERD, if you have pain in your gut, you don't have normal gut health. And you need to do some gut healing protocols. So gut is really one of the first things that I look at as well. It's really basic naturopathic medicine, functional medicine 101 is fixing the gut. And yet so many doctors do not know how to do it. And it's so overlooked and it's so important. Sleep is another thing that I put an aura ring on everybody. And I like to look at a person's steps in sleep. And I like to look at their stress levels. And these are the biggest drivers of mitochondrial dysfunction: is the wrong food, the wrong movement, the not sleeping enough, not getting good quality sleep, and stressing too much. So if a person doesn't have these in balance, then we have to fix their lifestyle. So lifestyle optimization is a big part of my practice, and really training people to develop new habits, and also not overlooking the internal mental habits people have around how they think about themselves. So I do a lot of performance and mindset coaching, as well as executive coaching.
That's a really good segue into the core themes of what we're talking about in the summit around brain rewiring. Because think about habits, or you think about, and whether those are behavioral habits that we might do, or choices we might make, or even thought patterns, all very similar in terms of just the way that our mind and some of the way that we have traditionally, gone about, or habits that we've developed in the past, how those operate. Can you talk a little bit about just make the connection between the role of some of that work that you do with your clients and the concept of brain rewiring or neuroplasticity, however you want to describe it.
Yeah. So to get really granular with you about brain rewiring and neuroplasticity, first I want to explain to your audience that your brain is not just in your brain. You have ganglia, you have nervous system, you have a nervous system completely outside of your brain that is communicating with your brain. And so your brain is taking in signals from your sensory experience. It's transducing those signals, it's interpreting them, and it's making, it's changing your behavior based on those signals. Similarly, you have mitochondria in almost all of your cells, aside from your red blood cells. And your mitochondria are equally sensing, taking information from chemical messengers, integrating that information, and then transducing that information, then integrating that information into actions in a cellular level. So you have a distributed consciousness network that's beginnings in your brain, but is actually throughout your entire body. So with that being said, you can't just focus on brain rewiring. You have to look at the nervous system being rewired. So I'm not a psychiatrist, but I have done a lot of research on mental health and mental illness and trauma. My company, Adama Bioscience, was really originally founded because I was able to rewire my body and heal from sexual trauma. And I wanted to enable other men and women to do so. And so the company is not only treating sexual trauma, but we are developing a therapy that is a new sex therapy that's designed to basically help people learn to have more pleasurable and less dysfunctional sex. Because a lot of what causes it is trauma, is relationship problems, is mood disorders, is experiences we have in our lives that change the way our bodies associate sex with pleasure or sex with pain. So I got really deep into the weeds of trauma because I really wanted to understand, how does a person have this physiology, which is our biological system, is kind of like our hardware. And then how does our software get programmed, right? So our software is our mind. And when you have abuse and neglect or trauma in your life, if you have social injuries, if you have, for example, even loss of social status, loss of family members, you have grief, you're gonna change the wiring of the software is gonna change. And it's also going to affect the hardware. Okay. So there's a bidirectional relationship between how well the hardware works with how well the software is functioning. So when a person experiences trauma or experiences something really traumatic, their brain learns that life is not safe in some way. And one of the biggest questions in chronic disease today is, how do you take a person out of this highly stressed, hypervigilant state of hyperarousal and fear, which does translate on a cellular level, literally affecting the way mitochondria function. So when you experience a major stressor, it can actually change your metabolic functioning and put you in a state of what's called the cell danger response. This is the work of Robert Naviaux, and he's a mitochondrial researcher, and I highly recommend reading his work as well as reading the work of Martine Picard. Because what they basically discovered is that our experiences with other people change our cellular functioning. And literally, our bodies are prediction machines. Our minds are prediction machines. We're trying to predict how to be alive and safe tomorrow by what we experience today. So when someone experiences trauma, it can literally change their entire nervous system's functioning. And it can make them seriously stressed and hypervigilant and in a state of even armored. Like, you can become an armored person. Your body can become in a defensive, sort of pent up, tense state. And this definitely can affect your functioning emotionally, physically. We see a lot more chronic pain in people with trauma, and we see a lot more mental illness. We see, especially with people with adverse childhood experiences, there's a lot more chronic disease and addiction. So we cannot look at trauma or pain in like a single episode in a person's life as just a thing that happened in the past. It actually has ramifications for their future. Chronic stress, on the other hand, is a little bit different than acute stressors or acute traumas. A lot of people have chronic stress, and that creates the conditions where their body starts going into energy saving mode and even illness behavior as a result of just being consistently stressed and actually draining their energetic resources. Your body cannot handle chronic stress over many months to years without it changing its physiology in order to accommodate the stress. We're not supposed to live in a chronically stressful environment. We're supposed to have really acute stressors that we recover from, but we don't give ourselves space to recover from even acute stress or chronic stress. It's just consistently barraging us every day, especially in American society. It's not really the same everywhere else in the world. So the end result of this is that you see mental dysfunction in a lot of humans in America because of the chronic stressors that are actually reducing neuroplasticity. So chronic stress over time will decrease the amount a person moves and wants to exercise. Like oftentimes people go into these behaviors where they're not moving their bodies enough because their bodies are exhausted and the stress has drained their energy capacity. And so they don't work out. Then they crave foods that are sweet, or they crave foods that are unhealthy, because those foods are designed to hit the bliss point in the brain. They're designed to hijack your brain. They're designed to get you addicted to the foods. And then people also engage in behaviors to mitigate stress and the emotional pain that they're experiencing. So they go into drinking, smoking, sedentary behavior, eating too much, having maybe too little or too much sex. It's really not rocket science to understand why people become dysfunctional. You just have to understand how a body's coping with stress and coping with challenges, or not coping with them because they don't have the resources to do so. So I really look at the body and the brain very differently than most doctors do. They're searching for diagnoses so they can bill and code for treatments. I'm looking for root causes, and I'm looking for why is a person in this state of mental dysfunction in the first place. And so one of the things that I've been part of the movement of is psychedelic medicine. And psychedelics are one of the few tools in the toolbox that can actually increase neuroplasticity on a cellular level. This has been demonstrated in many different studies. The only legal psychedelic that we have in America is ketamine. And ketamine is a really amazing tool for people who are severely depressed or suicidal. During the pandemic, I developed a ketamine-assisted therapy protocol for people that had a lot of lifestyle practices in it, as well as ketamine therapy, because I don't believe that you should just give people drugs. I think you need to give them a program to follow to optimize their brain function. So that means looking at what you're eating, reducing the foods that are causing inflammation in the brain, looking at how you're moving, making sure you're moving your body on a consistent basis, making sure that you do the things that your brain needs to function and have high neuroplasticity. So meditation has been shown to increase neuroplasticity. Exercise has been shown to increase neuroplasticity, but also psychedelics have been shown to increase neuroplasticity. So it's also very important for people to have social interaction and to challenge their minds on a regular basis. So intellectual challenges are really key. It's even really quite good if you combine exercise and intellectual challenges. So group sports is great because it causes your brain to actually work harder to learn to adapt to, a group activity. So I have an entire lecture on neuroplasticity that I've given in the past, because I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go about enhancing neuroplasticity, but really at the fundamental level, what you want is to increase mitohormesis. You want to increase the brain's ability to produce more energetic resources and then more neural connections. And that comes from optimizing mitochondrial function and then optimizing your social relationships.
I love this because the through line of so much of what you just said is the basic understanding that we experience stressors in life, whether they are acute or chronic stressors. They come from a lot of different places. And those stressors aren't just experienced momentarily and they go away. They have an impact on our body. And here's why I'm going down this path. Because so many times when a person is experiencing, what you described, right? The lack of feeling like they want to go move their body, or they're feeling like they're craving foods that they don't want to be eating, or they're drinking more than they would like to be drinking, or whatever the case is, right? We turn to ourselves and we say, gosh, I just don't have the willpower that I wish I had to engage in the behavior that I know I should be doing. We blame ourselves rather than understanding what you just described. That was absolute gold for everybody who is listening to this, because it helps you understand that you are not crazy.
Yeah.
Not weak. There are mechanisms underlying these decisions and these feelings that we have that are very real and very documented, but we just don't hear about them.
I mean, it took me literally 10 years of studying health to actually teach it. I mean, teach it at a university. I guess it was maybe 8 years, but to teach it at a university. And I put so much effort into this course that I taught. And when I finished this course, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I completely understand why people are so sick. Like I completely get it. Like it makes total sense to me now. And I had not heard the way that I was teaching things anywhere else. And I had not heard people talk about how a body adapts to challenges or has maladaptive behaviors. I mean, loneliness is a great example of this, right? So when someone's really lonely and they're alone and they've got social isolation in particular, loneliness creates maladaptive social cognition, which is another fancy way of saying that you will misinterpret social cues as negative quite often if you're consistently lonely and isolated, which means that you are less likely to socialize because your body is going into this behavior that is misinterpreting social cues and signals. And it's like, we look at this epidemic of loneliness, but we're not really asking ourselves, what is the solution to it? And it's not blaming these people for not interacting more with people because they don't feel safe when they're in social circumstances. And oftentimes it's highly influenced by their upbringing and by their own experiences with attachment. And when I started understanding the role of disorganized attachment and avoidant attachment and anxious attachment in human adult relationships, I was like, whoa. I mean, I ask every one of my patients and everyone, if people often make appointments with me that are called discovery sessions. And I kind of just like leave time on my calendar available for just strangers to make an hour-long appointment with me so I can keep my brain sharp. And it also helps me help people at a larger scale than I don't see a ton of patients in my practice because I work very high touch. But when I do these calls with people, the number of people who've said to me, I never thought that a doctor would ask me about my relationships or ask me about my relationship with my wife or my relationship with my work or my relationship with having trauma. And like, I've had so many people tell me, I've never told anybody else this, but maybe two people, and it's like, we are not looking at the elephant in the room, which is that when people experience social injury, whether it be rape, whether it be childhood neglect or abuse, whether it be, social ostracism, whether it be loss of a family member, like we don't look at that as a thing that's impacting our health. We just look at that as social circumstances. But these experiences directly affect our ability to function. And there's so much more trauma and there's so much more social injury than we really admit in modern medicine. And when I was in medical school and residency, it was not expected for you to talk about these things with your patients. This was the job of a psychologist. This is not the job of a doctor. But this is because we have completely broken down health into teeny, teeny, tiny little pieces where you have that job and you have that job and nobody's talking, nobody's communicating, and nobody's looking at the big picture of why this person is where they are at in their life. So I really love what I do because I get to like really meet a person where they're at and actually really teach them that like your health and your health decline is not always your fault. It's oftentimes the result of your experiences in life that have led to significant pain and significant trauma and significant challenges that you may not have the energy resources or the financial resources to actually handle. And 88% of the country is metabolically unhealthy. Much of the country is living in poverty. Much of the country is living in really not having enough financial resources to handle their demands. And so we expect people to be able to be flourishing and have flourishing health when our society does not support them. And I know how much money and time I've invested into my health to get to where I'm at. And I was given way more than the average person to begin with. In terms of my relationship to my family, I have a really great family and I have a really, really great social community around me. Now I've been independent since I left, the Midwest and left college and everything. So it's not like I had a trust fund or anything, but I've learned a lot about this idea of how well-being is a product of resources and demands. And when your resources exceed your demands, you have well-being. When your financial resources exceed your needs, you have well-being. And when you have too few resources to meet your demands, you start feeling broken. You start feeling like you're broke, literally. You start feeling like, crap, this is not working. And when you really break down well-being and health into that very simple way of thinking about life, you can actually understand why a lot of people are struggling and why they're so confused and why they don't know how to get out of the hole that they're in, and where they're not sure where to commit their resources because they're not sure what's going to work. And, I just hope that medicine starts to shift. And I think it is starting to shift. We're seeing more and more health coaches available. You definitely shouldn't try to heal completely on your own. It's really good to get a person to work on this stuff with you. And also it's really good to like tap your community for help, because that's what the community is there for.
You talked about that equation of resources versus demands. Can you maybe drill into the concept of resources a little bit and talk about, like, ideally, before you mentioned lifestyle practices, even, are there lifestyle practices that help to tip the scale in the direction of increasing our resources? Because I love talking about, psychedelic assisted therapy and, the fact that you used ketamine in a methodology or in a protocol as well. But the average person, to your point, doesn't have access to that, but they can start to make some of these seemingly small day-to-day changes that it sounds like have a really big impact.
Yeah. So let's just go over some of the stuff that's free. And then we'll kind of talk about things that have like low cost. So it is totally free to go walk. And if you have a phone and you have calls to take, I tell all these people who talk to me, they're like, I don't have time in my schedule to do any exercise. I'm like, you don't have time to not do exercise. Like you will continue to decline in your health if you do not move your body. Hands down, movement is life. Sedentary behavior is an early death. And I've seen this so many times that people start to move their body more and they start to get more energy. And why does this happen? Well, literally your brain needs signals to make more energy. Otherwise it makes less. So if you do not exercise, your brain and your body says, okay, well, I don't have any demands. So I'm going to make less mitochondria. I'm going to actually make less energy because I don't have demands to meet.
And I've never heard somebody talk about that before.
This is called the adaptive capacity. This is called the adaptive capacity model. And it's very clear in fitness physiology that you need to break your muscle fibers if you want them to grow. So you have to put a load on your muscles if you want them to. Your muscles are red for a reason. Do you know why your muscles are red? They're filled with mitochondria. Yeah. So your muscles are just big, giant battery packs. They're power plants. And if you don't regularly break those muscles apart, you're not going to grow bigger muscles. So if you don't move your body regularly, you're not going to make more energy. And so I've learned so much, even just in the last 2 weeks with a trainer. I've got a trainer for the first time. I did not use a trainer for the last 10 years. I have been slowly but surely going from, I was basically chronically fatigued in 2011, 2012. And I couldn't get out of bed. I mean, I had a bad viral infection and I was really unwell. And I had just left my residency. I was just starting my own career outside of residency. And I was a mess. And so when people see me at this glowing health, this doctor who's 39, and they're like, oh, she must have always been healthy. It's like, no, I was a mess. I have had to literally rebuild my health because most of my 20s were completely sedentary. I was in medical school. I was in college. I did not exercise. And it led to significant health problems. So I had to basically go from sedentary to walking. From walking, literally, I did Feldenkrais. Do you know what Feldenkrais is? It's probably the most easy exercise you can ever do, ever. There is nothing easier than Feldenkrais. It's basically like yoga for babies. I had to go to the YMCA across the street because I was so unwell. And the only energy that I had to do was Feldenkrais. And I used the sauna at the YMCA across the street from me when I lived in Oakland. So sauna is another great tool if you have access to one. Obviously, not every YMCA has them, but some of them do. YMCA was really cheap. Okay. I was a member of the YMCA because that was the cheapest gym I could afford. And I went to the sauna there and I would sit there and I would raise my heart rate passively. Now there's also, if you want infrared heat, lay in the sun for 15 minutes a day. You can get a lot of benefits from just 15 minutes of sunlight, vitamin D, increased nitric oxide. Even better if you lay in grass and you're getting grounding for free, you're getting energy from the earth. So if you live by an ocean, walking on the beach is a great way to get negative ions. So negative ions in the environment make you feel healthier. They're literally going to make you feel more vitality. So just getting into a forest nearby you, oftentimes there's parks that are for free. Forest bathing has been shown to reduce stress and literally measurably reduce stress on a cellular level. Even better if you can get to a pine forest. And by the way, all of this stuff is in my online course. And it's really funny that I had to find all the research behind all this stuff because I was like, where is the science of how do we improve health? And I was like, wow, there's actually tons of science on just using your environment to make yourself healthier.
Can I touch on that point for a second? And that's why I really love the way you're describing this, because it's one thing to say grounding or your skin touching the earth, right? It's another thing to say forest bathing. Something like that will lead to an improvement in your health. That feels like a really big leap for a lot of us to make.
I know.
What? But as soon as you start to talk about the scientific links between that behavior and the result, we understand why. And the natural skeptics out there, I'll raise my hand, we get bought in when we understand the link between the two.
So pine trees produce essential oils. And aromatherapy actually does have evidence that it can change your brain's functioning. Essential oils actually do have effects on the body. So when you're in a pine forest, you're getting this natural inhalation of very clean, oxygenated air that has natural pine oil in it. And there's evidence that this reduces the stress response on a cellular level. And so it's like just being in the forest can make you calm. And so walking around the forest with your family, very simple thing to do. Also just being in nature, you start realizing your nervous system is getting a lot more passive stimuli. In a city, there's a lot of active stimuli. You have to actually you have to look around, make sure you're safe. Whereas in a forest, there's so much stimulation, but it's all coming in passively. And as long as you obviously don't encounter a bear or like a moose or something, but generally speaking, most parks, don't have a ton of wild animals in them, so you're pretty safe. But don't underestimate the power of getting a group of people together and going to a nice park and having a picnic. Social connection is so nourishing for the mind, so overlooked, so incredibly important, and so good for you. And yet so many people are sitting alone in their homes and they can't remember the last time they hung out with friends. I made some new friends in Austin, and they said, we don't have a community and my partner doesn't have any friends in this town. And it was so clear that social isolation was actually affecting their relationship. So it's really important that you realize that you need more than just your partner. You need a community, you need a tribe. And your body feels unsafe unless it has people around it. So you have this natural alarm system that gets turned off with safe social interaction. So you will literally reduce the energy expenditures of your brain by just being around people that you love and trust. So, when I discovered all the social connection stuff, I was like, my mind was just completely blown because I was just so confused how I could have possibly overlooked something that was so important to health for over 8 years. How is that possible that I could overlook something that important? And yet at the same time, I was prioritizing it in my life, but I wasn't evaluating my patients and I wasn't evaluating their social interaction. I wasn't evaluating their relationships. And it's that's the first thing I ask now is tell me about your life, tell me about your relationships, tell me about your work, tell me about how much time you spend alone, how much time do you spend with others. And it's a really big part of my assessment now because it's literally make or breaks health.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that's so good. I'm proud of myself because there are about 10 rabbit holes that I'm not going down right now because I know we need to keep this on the rails. Something that you mentioned earlier is about this, company that you're building and some of the work that you're doing around sexual well-being. I know we have to wrap up, but I wanted to give you a chance to just talk a little bit about that because it's a space where in the United States, we're finally starting to talk about. We're finally starting, and it feels like it connects so many of the things you talked about, right? Like emotional and safe, close relationships, as well as some physical and mental and potentially spiritual well-being elements of this. So I would love to give you a chance to just dive into that a little bit, because I'm very curious about the work you'll be doing.
Well, when I started, I'll be honest with you, the last 2 years, since 2021, I've been studying the science of love, because I was like, I know that love heals. I just don't know why. And I was really curious. So I started breaking down the sort of love from like a biological level. I started studying evolutionary biology, and I was able to find some really amazing advisors that were able to give me their knowledge and their experience around understanding the biology and the neurobiology of love. So I discovered that there's the sex drive, there's a romantic love drive, and then there's the drive to attach. And the drive to attach involves our partners, our children, our families, and our communities. And so when you are in a community of people that you love and trust, you actually get oxytocin. And oxytocin is nature's medicine. It literally creates a feeling of safety and trust and bonding, right? So oxytocin is also likely behind the placebo response, which is fascinating. So when you expect a social interaction to increase your chances of getting healthier, you're basically anticipating that social connection is going to help heal you. And your brain doesn't know the difference between a placebo and a pill, just knows that like the whole experience you're actually going through is going to make you better. So they've actually done studies on the placebo response and how if you give a person a statin and give another person a statin and a placebo, they actually get better effects on cholesterol with the placebo added to the statin.
That's so good.
It's like nobody's thinking about this stuff because they're just not digging into the literature like I have, because it's really obscure stuff. But like I was like, okay, I understand social connection. I understand. So what about like romantic love? You know, what is romantic love about? And in romantic love is all about, romantic love is like, let's start with the sex drive and then we'll get into romantic love. So when you meet somebody that you're interested in, you tend to want, when you're dating, you tend to be having sex with people, right? So modern dating, most of the time you're having sexual encounters. And the sex drive is designed to get you to go find people to have sex with. Because biologically, whether you want kids or not, your programming, your most primitive programming, is to survive, gather resources, reproduce, and connect. So that is your baseline programming, whether you have kids or not. Which is funny because I actually have friends who've gotten pregnant and they're like, I'm like, do you realize when you have sex with someone regularly, there's a good chance you're going to have a baby, right? And they're like, well, we weren't planning on it. And I'm like, you realize that this is what your body is planning on, right? Like your body wants this. So many people are engaging in like unprotected sex. Teenagers to people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, like people are doing this without really realizing what their biology wants them to do, which is to make a person. Mm-hmm. So the sex drive is there whether you like it or not. And what pornography and online dating does is hijack the sex drive to get you to spend time swiping and spend time masturbating. So there's a lot of, and if you look at like all of makeup and fashion, for the most part, most of what the beauty industry is trying to get you to do is to reproduce as well. So it's hijacking your desire, your drive to be desirable to get you to buy stuff. Okay. So like, I actually started wearing a lot less makeup when I realized that I was being sold this idea that I'm more beautiful with more makeup, when actually people think I look better with less. So there's there's a reason why people are so confused about their sexuality in our country, because we're getting sent messages day in and day out to swipe, to masturbate, to cover our bodies in things we don't need, to buy stuff we don't need. So in order to be attractive, to find a mate, to reproduce. So there's a sex drive, right? And then if you are lucky, hopefully it's actually, there's evidence that suggests that there's pretty much 100% of people will fall in love at some point in their life. And that means that they're going to feel the experience of romantic love. Whether it's reciprocated is a totally different story, but romantic love is pretty universal. And when you start sleeping with a person that you start to have feelings for, when people say, "Oh, I'm starting to have feelings for this person," that means that the romantic love drive is starting to turn on. And romantic love is literally a commitment device. It's designed to get you to only focus on one person and have sex with them more than other people so that you make a baby. And it's literally designed to get you to be physiologically and psychologically addicted to another person. So
Wow.
it's really funny that we value romantic love so deeply because you're basically high when you're under the experience of romantic love, right? Now, not everybody loses that addiction or attachment, right? Not everybody loses that over time. There's actually plenty of people who remain passionately in love with their partner over years and decades. Um, and I'm actually personally curious and invested in the idea that like we might be able to revive that feeling between people through psychedelic medicine and through psychedelic therapies, such as MDMA assisted therapy. So there's the sex drive, romantic love drive, and the drive to attach. Why do we attach? Because it actually enhances the chances of this child surviving. It increases the chances of their nervous system developing properly. It increases the chances of the family staying together. Families that stay together are more likely to live longer and healthier lives because there's more social support. There's more sharing of information and resources. There's more. There's just more depending on others to make sure that you're okay if you need help. So I'm very interested in how we create stronger relationships, stronger families, and even better sex between partners. So now I'm going to answer your question around the sex stuff, because why am I focusing on sex first versus all these other aspects of health that I could focus on? Because love is not just sex. It's not just love. It's not just romantic love. It's not just attachment. It's our experience with love is this entire system that we have evolved. These three separate drives are all interconnected for a reason, because they get us to move. They get us, they're motivational forces that get us to move so that we will become healthier and we will become more flourishing adults. We become more able to survive and more able to pass on our genes. So one of the biggest problems in society is sexuality. And it starts with childhood and it extends all the way to our teenage years, to our adult years. And there is a lot of trauma. There's a lot of unwanted sexual advances. There's a lot of giving in to sex you don't really want to have. There's a lot of people who have a lot of sex with a partner, but then they don't really want to be in love with them, but they can't stop having sex because they're like, oh my God, I can't stop with this person. So there's a lot of dysfunction, but there's also a big question of how do we increase sexual function, right? Like, how do we not just fix bad sex or train people to have even more consensual sex, but how do we amplify sexual health outcomes for people? My career has always been about not just fixing sickness, but improving health outcomes, improving health itself. So I was studying sex therapies because I was like, well, the last time that sex therapy was invented was the 60s. And really, it was Kinsey's work and Masters and Johnson's work that were pioneers in improving sexual health and resolving sexual dysfunction. So when you have sexual dysfunction, it's either due to biological causes like hormone deficiencies, or health problems like metabolic diseases, or other health issues, or it's due to psychological problems like trauma, trauma is really psychosomatic. It's really psychobiological. But it can also be due to relationship problems. It can be due to self-image and mood disorders and body image problems. And so when people say they have problems with sexuality, you really have to dig into, well, where's the root of this? Where did this come from? And what I've discovered is that the majority of people's sex problems are actually relational. So I was like, bingo, here is the space that I want to be working in, is sexuality and relational health. I am not a sex therapist. I am not a relationship therapist. I am not a psychologist. And I am 100% admitting that out loud, because who do I have? Like, why do I have the right to innovate in an area that I'm not an expert in? Well, I brought in experts. I brought in an incredible advisory board of luminaries from sexual medicine and sexual health, and people working from outside of the mainstream sexual health system, the mainstream sex medicine. And I said, I want to change things for people and I want to figure out how to do this. So I want to design a new protocol that's not only going to help heal sexual dysfunction, but I want it to improve sexual function. So these therapists are like, that's a pretty tall order that you want us to design. And I'm like, well, this is what I think the world needs, and I'm going to go do it. And you're going to help me. And so they're like, okay, sure. So now I'm working with researchers at multiple institutions. I'm working with sex therapists. I've got my incredible advisory board. And we're basically taking what Masters and Johnson did in the 60s and we're amplifying it. We're going beyond just sensate therapy. And we're actually creating a sex therapy that can help address problems that come up during sex itself, which is a really exciting thing to be doing. And, I do anticipate that my company is going to also develop products and services around relationships, as around social connection as well in the future. And we're going to be doing a lot of content creation, and we're building a lifestyle brand as well, because we don't really want people to see us as a clinical sex therapy company. We want people to see us as an approachable company that is really trying to meet consumers where they're at. And we're developing our program to teach people how to become our coaches so that they can teach their communities our protocol. So it's really very much biohacking sexuality, because I don't think that going through the mainstream sex therapy system is it's going to take a long time to do that. It would take us 10 to 20 years. Whereas if we go to meet people where they're at in their communities, and we train people who are already sex coaches or already sex therapists, have them guide people through our protocol, through our platform, we'll be able to reach a lot more people a lot faster. And my long-term vision is that we combine our protocol with psychedelic medicine to help heal sexual trauma, to help heal relationship problems, and to help heal mood disorders. So we want to work within this psychedelic medicine industry, which is, by the way, very slow moving. It's taking a long time for this stuff to get approved, but MDMA will probably get approved in our lifetime. Psilocybin is getting decriminalized. And as these things roll out, we will train psychedelic therapists to learn our therapeutic protocol so that couples and singles can go through our system to heal from the things that have caused them the most dysfunction. So as somebody who personally had hypoactive arousal, I did not get wet during sex in my 20s. I also had sexual pain. Every time I had sex, it hurt, and I was in a lot of pain afterwards. And then I had anorgasmia, so I was not able to have an orgasm with a partner. I didn't know that these were sexual dysfunctions until I was able to use MDMA with a partner and overcome these dysfunctions. And yet I was like, it's not, did that give me like the best sex of my life? No, that actually gave me pretty much normal sex. So do I think that there's something to the combination of psychedelics and our sex therapy? Absolutely. And the reason why I'm not pursuing psychedelics immediately is that, well, that's a little bit not true. We're running a retreat and we're going to run a conference in countries where psychedelics are legal in 2023, 2024, like the end of this year and next year. So we are going to be exploring psychedelics and we are going to be studying them. But our first study is actually going to be evaluating the effects of our protocol. And so people who join our sex therapy program can opt into our study and can go through our sex therapy program. And then if they'll get paid to be in the study. They have to pay to be in the program, but we're going to give them a certain amount of money to join the study. Now, we are also going to be collaborating with some major institutions on studying the effects of psychedelics at our retreats we're going to be holding as well. So, but to basically explain the reason why I could talk about this on a neuroplasticity and brain reprogramming summit is that psychedelics and sexuality have the power to transform consciousness. And when you there's a really good book that should be read called Magnificent Sex. And if you actually read what makes sex truly magnificent, and you actually see the defining characteristics of magnificent sex, they resemble a psychedelic experience. So psychedelics have the ability to increase neuroplasticity and rewire the brain specifically around trauma, and also rewire the brain specifically around depression, anxiety, and mood disorders. And also they've saved a lot of people's marriages. There was 500,000 people given psychedelics in couples therapy formats in the 60s and 70s before it became illegal. I believe it was the 60s and maybe early 70s, but it was legal to give people MDMA in a couples context. So what is MDMA doing to people? It actually is rewiring the social reward system. It's flooding your brain with dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and oxytocin, which incidentally are the same neurotransmitters as romantic love and attachment. So you're literally giving your brain this feeling of safety and trust is only though, if your context and if your mindset is properly prepared, will you get these benefits. So if you do not have good set and setting, your mindset's off or your settings off, you can actually have a traumatizing experience from taking psychedelics because your brain will always try to get you out of danger by activating the sort of safety switch, which is your vasopressin system, which is defense and aggression and protection. So what I'm basically trying to explain is like slowly but surely, we will see a movement where there will be an opportunity for people to have a safe experience with their partner using psychedelic medicine, and then to integrate these experiences with a sex therapy protocol, which can actually rewire the brain's relationship to sex itself.
Amazing. As we finish up, where can people learn more about you so they can get in touch with you about this study, about this new program?
Find me on Instagram, first and foremost, at drmolly.co. And then my website is the same, www.drmolly.co. And then if you want to learn more about the study, I'll be posting it on my social and my website. We're actually launching our website, Adamo, probably in the next month. But keep tabs on me through my personal website and my Instagram, because that's where everything's going to be posted as well.
Oh my gosh. Like I said, there are 10 rabbit holes we did not go down, but I just want to thank you so much. This was incredibly informative. And like I said, for a natural skeptic like me who loves data, who loves science, this was exactly what I needed today. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being part of the summit.
Amazing. Thanks for having me.